So today I thought of speaking about a very important topic. This topic has to do with actually the central bank, public procurement, various issues that affect our monetary and fiscal policy, as well as the efficiency in which the government can manage its money. So, as we all know, a robust and independent central bank is vital for any country to perform well. The central bank's policy affects anything to do with interest rates or inflation, which in turn affect people's everyday lives, because we all know how things such as this have a detrimental impact when we look at mortgages, leases, whatever it may be. And an independent central bank is very important because it promotes a stable economy. The first thing that needs to be done is that the central bank needs to remain autonomous and be allowed to implement the monetary policy that it sees fit. For far too long, we have seen political meddling in the central bank. This is why I commend current Central Bank Act that has been implemented. For example, in April 2022, that was the time where the government of Sri Lanka had to pay state sector salaries at a time when the country didn't even have any money. As you remember, we went from about 86 billion GDP to about 74 billion GDP in a matter of 2-3 years since 2019. And as a result, the government printed over 125 billion rupees just to make sure that salary advances for the Aurudu season as well as small bonuses were given. But ultimately, this created huge inflationary pressures, which in turn affected the economy. This is why I said the central bank needs to remain independent. Another important thing that correlates with the central bank are remittances. Sri Lanka receives about $6 to $7 billion a year on remittances. It's one of our largest foreign exchange earners. I think after that is tourism income, which is why these two sectors really were so important for us to recover. And COVID really destroyed our tourism sector. And what happened with the central bank is that many people were using informal channels to send money. This was because of various issues going on there. And ultimately, what I would propose is that central bank always promotes its official channels. This can ensure that the central bank always receives this 6 to 7 billion, which is so crucial for our foreign reserve. And this, I would say, can be done by simply offering premium interest rates, because we cannot sacrifice this point again. This was the point that led us to having at one point only $72 million left in our central bank when the crisis hit our lowest point. And that was the point where we had to finally declare bankruptcy. The central bank must also provide a safety net of at least 3 months worth of imports, by making sure that 3 months worth of imports, that amount for those imports, are always in our central bank reserves. This was the point where we did not calculate how much money we would have left. And as a result, we didn't have money finally to import the fuel. So this is why it is so important that the central bank keeps a reserve of at least 3 months worth of import, which provides a safety net against economic turbulence, and also helps us with maintaining our exchange rate in the process. Another important measure is, when I look back, the government of Sri Lanka always resorted to heavy borrowings to fund its deficit over many years. When you conduct a project, when you do a project for the benefit of the country, you also try to make sure that that project, once built, can generate enough money to pay back the loan and the respective interest. But unfortunately, with many projects, I call certain projects white elephant projects, those were the projects where some sort of oversight should have been there to say, hey, are you spending this money wisely? Because at the end of the day, you're borrowing to spend for that. When we look at taxes, Taxes are also something that's very, very important. Now, for example, when we look at the previous government, they reduced VAT from 15% to 8%. That 15 to 8% of VAT reduction led to a loss of approximately 500 to 600 billion rupees per annum for the government. When you reduce taxes such as this, you must also make sure that you can get that 500 600 billion from some other place. And this is something that can never happen again, because finally, when the government did not have revenue, they resorted to extraordinary measures which continued to exacerbate the entire situation. And that is why tax reforms and anything to do with taxation needs to also be looked at in a very, very intricate manner. So this is why, when we look at all these issues, and I have a document right here. Over here, you can see that government revenue has always been dropping in Sri Lanka. These are central bank facts. And then this next chart shows the debt, how debt has continuously increased. Then you have finally a chart showcasing our official reserves. And as you can clearly see, from 2020-21 to 2022, our official reserves fell. So in that case, we have never really had the statistics to say that we were doing extraordinarily well. What I am proposing are simply things just to get us on track, things to make us grow. This is why I highlighted that the IMF is so important for Sri Lanka. The latest news that I've heard from the IMF is that now we have received a 28% haircut on all the debts. Now, according to my knowledge, if we outperform our GDP expectations, which hopefully we will, the haircut will be brought down to about 15%. But if we actually do not do well in terms of the growth, the haircut can be also brought up to 40%. So the IMF is not trying to make life difficult for us. They are just trying to give us a viable solution. And this is why I commend the Central Bank Act, the Public Debt Management Act, the Public Financial Management Act, and also the latest Economic Transformation Bill. Because what the Economic Transformation Bill is trying to do is it's trying to make us an export-oriented economy. If you look at Vietnam, Vietnam was a country that also had a war. Vietnam, however, has for the last 3 decades grown at an average of about 6% GDP per year. I think this year they are projected to grow by about 5.5%. Sri Lanka is doing the same thing. But there are a lot of things that are still going wrong in Sri Lanka that I don't see as well with Vietnam. Now, for example, Vietnam is focusing on producing electronics. I think about 45% of their GDP is based on the production of electronics, and then another 10% on machinery. So they are really focusing on the industries of the future, which is something that Sri Lanka has also not been able to capitalize on. We have all these export processing zones. We need to bring in the right companies to come and set up shop in Sri Lanka, so that Sri Lanka can, with its geostrategic location, can also be a hub for industries of the future and not just be a country that's primarily agricultural and tourism and services related. And finally, I forgot to talk about this point, but I'll be very brief. Procurement is another important step towards Sri Lanka's growth, because enhancing our public procurement process is vital. This is because with technology, for example, if we introduce e-procurement, that will diminish corruption. That will diminish the time it takes for procurement processes also to be finished. And it is so vital that we retain the correct talent who are part of this process through better salaries. I said this in the previous podcast. It is so important that we pay our people well. But ultimately, what I'm just trying to highlight is that Sri Lanka really needs to look at other countries, use them as a role model, and finally get down to doing things. Because even in 2022, if such mistakes are being made, which led to the country going from a GDP of 86 to $74 billion and having official reserves plummet is a sign of bad policy, is a sign of problems within. And public procurement and the central bank are two crucial things that we need to get right to ensure the long-term future of Sri Lanka is prosperous. So thank you.